Welcome to Massey College. Bienvenue. My name is Nathalie Desrosiers and I'm the principal of Massey College. It's a great pleasure to have you here. We have some people in the audience and also some people watching online. I just want to welcome you all to another edition of the Senior Fellows Lunch in the fall of 2021. I want to acknowledge that Massey College is built on indigenous lands of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the land of the Mississaugas of the Credit. It is the treaty land of the Mississaugas of the Credit, and we want to acknowledge our duty of stewardship toward this land and the great privilege that we have to continue to gather together here to listen to a great speaker today. So we're very much looking forward. I just want to, again, thank you all for coming and being there, and I'll pass the mic to Professor Jenkins.
Okay, thank you so much, Natalie, and welcome everyone. Thank you for coming. I'm Professor Jennifer Jenkins, and I'm the organizer of these luncheons together with Professor Mohammed Tavakoli, and it is my honor to introduce our speaker today, Chief Stacey Laforme. This is on here. Chief Laforme is the elected chief of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, where he was born and raised. He has served his community for over 20 years, being first elected to council in 1999. Chief Laforme is committed to increasing involvement and communication between elected council and both on and off reserve membership. He's very active throughout the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nations treaty land and territory, which encompasses 3.9 million acres of southern Ontario, not only as chief, but as a notable storyteller, poet, and published author. Chief Laforme has the great honor of being just the third person here at Massey College to be appointed as an honorary senior fellow of the college. He joins here the Duke of Edinburgh and the Chancellor of Oxford with this honor. In 2018, it's de droit des nai.
Oh, that's close enough.
Okay, probably not close at all, but the Aboriginal Health Centre awarded Chief Laforme the Walter Cook Wisdom Keeper Award in recognition of his capacity to exemplify significant and continuous service to the community by demonstrating integrity, generosity of spirit, humility, courage, collaboration, the good mind, and traditional ways of knowing and being. Chief Laforme's topic today is Perspectives on Reconciliation. Please join me in welcoming him. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that, and I apologize for, I would apologize normally for the long-winded introduction of my bio and stuff, and normally I stop people whenever we're at an event and they start going into that, but I've been to the high table, and I've heard it a lot, so I know you're used to it, so it's called. So I know you're a relatively quiet crowd, and that's okay. But just so you know, I'm gonna want some applause here and there throughout, and if you're not sure when, just all right. I found my go-to guy now, so whenever I point to you, sir, just take right off. So, Ani, Bazu, Nagani, Anishinaabekanini, Stacey Laforme, Disnakas, Credit Dunjaba, Mayinga Dodam, Mississauga, Anishinaabe Dowell. Just to let you know that I'm what my name is, that I'm from the Mississaugas of the Credit of the Anishinaabe people, that my clan is either turtle or wolf. On my mother's side, I'm wolf, and on my father's side, I'm turtle. I tell people that I choose wolf because it's sexy, but not really. I mean, I tease a lot about it, but the fact is that the turtle and the wolf have certain recognized roles or certain traits that make them good for certain roles and responsibilities in the culture. I also told you my Anishinaabe name, which roughly translates to leads people man. And then I guess that was it. Also that I'm Giima or Ogama for my First Nation. I still answer to chief, but chief is a colonial construct and not of my people. I still answer to chief, but out of respect to you. So most times I go by Giima or Gama. Okay. I wrote some things down here. Well, actually, many years ago, I was at an AFN leadership meeting, which is a national body of Indigenous chiefs that gather to talk about Indigenous issues, and then, usually it's split somewhere, and they vote, and the high side that votes them, and this side gets. That's what the rule is. Anyway, I was at this meeting, and they were talking. One of the first times they were talking about missing and murdered women. And so everybody sort of split up and went to all the meetings because, as you can imagine, there's lots to talk about when we only gather once or twice a year. So everybody went to certain spots, and I stayed in this room and listened to the discussion about missing and murdered women. And I was so moved that I stood up and said, as a leader and as a person who has some exposure to the world around us, that I have an obligation, as do everybody else, to start talking about missing and murdered women whenever I had the opportunity. And I promised that whenever I had in front of an audience that I would talk and remind people about this issue until it was no longer an issue. And by the way society deals with women across our world, I think that sadly I'll be talking about this issue, forever. It's unfortunate. I often say that for Indigenous people, and make no mistake, when I talk about missing and murdered women, I'm talking about all the Indigenous women, but also all those who are adversely affected across this world. And I'm not talking about necessarily strangers. I am, because the numbers are for who kidnaps or steals or kills. The numbers are more likely to be with a stranger, but there is also domestic violence and abuse that goes on, and that is also part of the story, and both pictures need to be looked at. Now, for me, when I left this meeting, I went home and I wrote a poem that I read. Oh, I should tell you, in case you didn't know, I write poetry. And I use that when I talk to people, because no offense to professors and academics, but I could stand up here for hours and talk about facts and figures, but for most people, once a test is over, they'd forget it. But if you can make a connection, and through the arts is such a wonderful way to make that connection, whether it's music, drumming, or poetry. So I think that can last a lifetime for people. So I use poetries, and certainly when I have a few minutes, like 10 minutes to speak on a topic, I use poetry. And I wrote this poem, and I apologize if it's harsh, but I wrote this poem called Heartbeats, and I use this to talk about missing and murdered women. Sometimes I wake up at night and call for you, and for a heartbeat, all is right with the world. But you're gone, and you can't come home, and my world will always be chaos. I cry because I cannot hold you or touch you. I also cry because for one heartbeat, you are here. I have seen you on every corner, in every window of every store. Sometimes I swear I hear your voice, but it's never you. How could it be? And though I know it can't be you, for one heartbeat, I think it is. So I find myself searching every face, listening to every wind-blown word. My mind knows the truth, but allows my heart a moment of purity. And although the deception is brief, it exists. And in that second, so do you. And I'm not sure if it's a blessing or a curse. How do I move on when I see you every time I turn my head too quick? How can I face the world knowing you are not in it, yet so briefly you are? And your image gives me so much love, yet the knowledge that it's just an image breaks my heart. My heart breaks every night and all through the day, but I wouldn't give up the illusion to end the pain. So for 23 hours and 55 minutes of every day, I grieve, but for 5 minutes, all is right in my world. So I chose to use that method of reaching the audience because we all connect with loss and pain. And that's one way that brings it home for us, that understanding of loss. And it's a difficult poem at any time, and challenging, but it's a difficult topic, and it's something that we can't ignore and we have to deal with. So that's why I open with that poem a lot when I can. So I don't have to do a land acknowledgement. We already did one. But I like to do it because there's a piece in here that you don't do. So I acknowledge the Creator, the world around us, and our place within it. I acknowledge the many nations that walk this land in the past, the many nations that walk it today, and welcome you to the treaty and territory of the Mississaugas of the Anishinaabe. Now, the opening of that is so important to me because it talks about I acknowledge the Creator, I acknowledge the world around us, and our place within it. And through a lot of my talks, that fundamental statement of acknowledging the world around you and your place within it is a part of what I say, part of what I talk about, a part of discovery. And I never even realized that it was in the opening of my land acknowledgement where I first express the importance and significance of understanding the world around you and your place within it, until I start doing other writings and talking about other things and how they always eventually led back to that understanding. Even when you talk about reconciliation, it's not just about Indigenous and non-Indigenous. It's not even just about people. It's about the world around us and our place within it in its broadest concept. And so that flows back to that statement as well. So I was going to offer you a prayer, but we only have 20 minutes, so I'm going to skip that. And you've all heard my prayer before anyway, and if you haven't, it's in the book. So I wanted to talk about the poem I wrote called 215 Reconciliation. So I was honored because when I wrote this poem, I should tell you that when I write, I become the character within the poem. The perspective becomes my perspective. The feelings become my perspective. And so I could be laughing, I could be crying. I could have tear running down my cheek. Not outright blubbering, a manly tear is allowed, but sometimes it's very difficult and challenging. I say, when you're in a room with people, you can share energy and you can feel the energy in a room. But if you're writing something on a piece of paper and you want people to have that same feeling reading it, you have to find a way to leave a little something of yourself behind. And so when I write a lot of my stuff, it's not easy. It's challenging because I live through the emotional turmoil of the words on the paper. And when I wrote Reconciliation and 215, and then I did it on, the news people foolishly let me have a live feed and allowed me to talk, and so I talked, and then I read the poem, and so they had to play it all on TV, whereas opposed normally they could just pick pieces out, right? And so when I wrote this, Kevin Hearns from the Bare Naked Ladies and Josh Finlayson from Sky Diggers, I think that's the name, took it and put it to music and then put a video behind it. And so if you get a chance to hear the video and hear the music, it's a really powerful piece that's put together with it. And from there, I thank them, and they have it on their site, and it's on YouTube and stuff. But I want to know that when I wrote this poem, I was angry, I was hurt. I wrote it from a place of all these things, even from a perspective of love. So all that was going on when I wrote it. And it's not, and when you hear the end, you might think that reconciliation is not possible because of the way I've stated this, but that was not my intent. My intent was to show people that what we've been calling reconciliation for so long is merely scratching the surface on the real issues that we have to deal with. And this brings to life, and a realization of those children being uncovered brings to life the depth of the discussions and the work that we have to do when it comes to reconciliation. So it's more of a strong reminder that, yes, these things are all nice on the surface, but we're talking about something that's going to take us perhaps a generation to fix. And so I wanted people to understand that. And I'm going to try and read you the poem relatively quickly, because I can still remember when I wrote it, so it still sometimes bring back, those feelings, and I don't want you to see me with a manly tear. Reconciliation, 2:15. I sit here crying. I don't know why. I didn't know the children. I didn't know the parents. But I knew their spirit. I knew their love. I know their loss. I know their potential. And I am overwhelmed by the pain and the hurt. The pain of the families and friends. The pain of an entire people. Unable to protect them, to help them, to comfort them, to love them. I did not know them, but the pain is so real, so personal. I feel it in my core, my heart, my spirit. I sit here crying, and I am not ashamed. I will cry for them and the many others like them. I'll cry for you. I'll cry for me. I'll cry for what could have been. Then I will calm myself, smudge myself, offer prayers, and know they are no longer in pain. No longer do they hurt. They are at peace. In time, I will tell their story. I will educate society so their memory is not lost to this world. And when I am asked, what does reconciliation mean to me? I will say, I want their lives back. I want them to live, to soar. I want to hear their laughter, see their smiles. Give me that, and I'll grant you reconciliation. So it's, yeah, you can applaud. Thank you. My guy left the room, so thank you for that. But as you can see, when you hear the ending of it, you might think that, well, what are we doing then if I can't give him what he's asking, so how can we get there? But it's more a statement of understanding the depth and breadth of the work we have to do, as opposed to we can't do it. And I'm going to tell you something that I told a politician in a meeting, and I use myself as an example. And I'll do that now. I said, I'm angry. And I'm not in your face, jump up and down angry. I'm deep in the bones angry. I said, it's an anger that comes from generation upon generation of abuse and a sense of helplessness. I said, I'm not angry at the person who cut me off in that car or the person who's serving me in line. I'm not angry at them. I'm angry at all this pent-up trauma and the things that have gone on in the past and through our lives and through history. And so when things happen that spark that anger, that make that anger rise, it's important not only to you that you understand why, and it's not about necessarily the moment or this action. It's a deep, something that's been there for, trauma that's been there for a long time. But it's not only important for you, maybe it's even more important for the indigenous people to understand this, because we don't not always recognize this. So sometimes we'll feel this sense of anger and resentment and hostility, and it's not at you, it's because of the history. And I think that, indigenous people need to understand that as well as everybody else. And when I talk about that, it's not just indigenous. There are other parts of our society who are marginalized, who've dealt with trauma in a different way perhaps, but they're angry as well. And we have to be careful. If we have nothing but a society of angry people, we're never going to be who we're supposed to be. And I think that's an important message that has to come out of these type of moments and poems. Also, sorry, I have to get this. No, just kidding. But I was the only one guilty of not turning my phone off. But when I talk about reconciliation in this moment, and we did a call out for the Prime Minister and Premier to immediately lower the flags. And then I called some mayors that I know in the area and I said, lower your flags. And some people said, to me, you're not going far enough. I said, in this moment, we want respect, we want love, and we want to grieve. All the other stuff will come. But in this moment, respect and love is important. And so that's why I said this is a part of it that has to be looked at first. Yes, we're all doing the rest of it. We're talking about holding people accountable, talking about looking for the rest of the children, talking about DNA. All that stuff is coming. But in that moment, it was important to not only those children and not only to the Indigenous people, but in my mind to Canada as a whole, that it understand respect, love, and grief. And for the most part, I think that a lot of Canadians have connected and understood the pain and hurt of this, because these aren't just our children. These are our children, the children of this country. And this is a moment in time to become better and do better. This is a moment that can change the way we go forth into the future. And we don't have so many moments that we can let one go by. So I see opportunity. I've been asked, what should we do by a lot of different people about this issue? They want to come to our ceremonies and do things, and I go, that's great. You want to raise funds for residential schools, that's great as well. But these are your kids too. These are your children too. So do something in your own backyard so this memory doesn't fade away, that reminds us. Because we are very much a people of sight. If it's not in front of us, we forget about it. And so I said, do something with your community, your people that's meaningful to you and that remembers this moment and the opportunity that it presents. And you don't have to do it in my way. Do it in your own way. And that's important as well. I'm not going to do this part. There was a poem that I had, but I'm not going to do it. It was from the perspective of our Mother, the Earth, and if we don't become better caretakers and stuff. Because as I said, reconciliation isn't just about the people, it's also about the world around us and our place within it. I will skip that, but I will say, though, what I've been telling people is, instead of thinking of climate change as a problem to be solved, think of Mother Earth as a soul to be saved. I said, if you can do that, I said, small thing, you can change the world. I mean, just think about it. If you take the perspective of Mother Earth as a soul to be saved, as opposed to climate as a problem to be solved, that changes the way you view yourself and the world around you. That changes the way you act with your friends and your family. Maybe the one individual can't do enough and can't interact enough to change the world, but it can change her or his world. And really that's what we're talking about, is a fundamental shift in who you are and understanding the world around you. And so I challenge people to do that. The other part of that is, though, is that, and I won't say that's a moment of inspiration, but we all know those moments of inspiration, those aha moments. We're going to do better. This is not going to happen on my watch, so we'll take the extra steps and we'll do the extra things for a week, a couple days, maybe a month. And then because life is what life is, and it's so much difficult to change, we'll go back and we'll become to live our life the way we always did. But that's the thing. Inspiration may be fleeting, but it's never truly gone. It exists inside of us somewhere. And, for most of us, it'll be like we'll be doing something in the garden or we'll be doing something else and we'll remember that moment of inspiration and we'll go. And for most of us, we'll just push it back down where it came from. And so eventually it just stays in the back of our mind and lives there. But that's the secret. Inspiration is fleeting, but it's never truly gone, And so every time you remember that, if you pick it up and start again, there's nothing wrong with starting again. Just every time you have that inspirational moment, why not? So I failed once, so I'll do it again this time. So that's important to me. I say that inspiration can I say that change can survive a moment of inspiration, but not a lifetime of commitment. And that's really what we're talking about in certain terms. So, how am I doing on time? Anybody know? I'm still okay yet? Yeah. Okay, good. Good. Because as you can see, I got to tell you the story. I told them I was asked to fill in for Perry Bellegarde because he couldn't make it to an event in Niagara Falls, and they said 45 minutes. And I go, all right. So I wrote 11 pages up, figuring 11 pages and me interacting should get 45 minutes. Well, page 6 and 2 hours later, the building is closing, and I go, Chief, we're really enjoying this. We'd like to stay, but they're shutting the lights off. So 11 pages is, probably good for about 4 hours. And I brought like 5 pages. So anyway. I'm sorry, I was gonna, I want to read you a poem though, I know. I just want to find the right one, because as I said, I have a number of pages up here where I was going to talk, but. Okay, so I met Kevin Hearns and Josh Finlinson, I think. Anyway, I didn't know who they were, because I'm a country boy, I only know country. I barely knew who Gord Downey was until I started hearing more and more what he was trying to accomplish, and then I found out who he was. So, and actually behind the last concert, behind the scene at the last concert that Gord gave on Secret Path in Toronto, I went backstage and they were doing a circle and they were doing a smudging, and I joined them, and I presented an eagle feather to Mr. Downey on behalf of our nation and the work he was doing. I didn't do it publicly, or I didn't even do it where anybody really know. I just did it, behind the scenes for him to understand that we were proud of him and we respected what he was doing, so it was important. Not a lot of people even know that we did that. Anyway, I met those two gentlemen, and through them, another gentleman named Tim Thompson, and he said, one of them said they should come to me and I'd write a poem for the CBC opening of the Olympics. And I said, what do you want? He said, I want something about promise. Oh, like, right? I mean, that's like the world. So I wrote this poem for him. And an original version I sent to him, he goes, Chief, this is nice, but it feels not like your words, not as strong as some of the other things I've seen you write. I go, well, I was toning it down for your audience. He goes, no, just be you. So I said, okay. And so this is a poem I wrote for that. And when I work with Kevin and Josh, we collaborate on this poem, and they do different pieces of it. I do different pieces of it, and then we perform it together at the end. But it was called Promise. And I think a lot of what I talk about is in here, so I'll just read it. We were promised. We live in a world that has such beauty, yet that beauty is overshadowed. Even our mother, the earth, cries. We are losing any sense of connection to our planet, to each other. Our future is no longer promised. It was not supposed to be this way. We were promised love, happiness, and safety when we came to this world. Yet it seems promises do not possess the weight they once did. No longer are they born in the heart and formed in the soul, but are merely words of convenience that flow from unconsidering lips. We were promised. As each promise fell, so too did we. But we still need them. Never has it been more apparent. We need to reclaim the promise that we're all born into, that we have a right to. Stand with me. Take my hand. Let us remember, and let truth emerge from the heart and spirit, a commitment that shall not break nor wither with age, but only grow stronger in time. Let us build on our promise and heal wounds. I promise to be better, to do better. I promise to love, honor, and care for our Mother the Earth. I promise to ensure our children grow up and do not live under the shadow of violence. I promise to embrace the things in life that make you and I different. I promise that I will love you even though I may not know you. I shall not forget the past or broken promises, but neither shall I dwell there. I embrace this moment of truth and hope. I will carry this idea, this dream, this reality into our future. This is a truth we can stand on, build on, before the Creator, in front of the world. From my heart and soul, all this I promise. Okay, that worked. You know, when I wrote it, I envisioned something much different than Tim did with it for the video. And I mean, he did a great job. Don't get me wrong, but it was almost a entirely Indigenous perspective on it, and which was fine because it raises awareness and it has this moment and people get to see it and learn about it. But when I envisioned it, I envisioned a child saying, I promised. I envisioned an older person saying, I promise. And I envisioned at the end, I promise, coming from like a huge group of people. Because what it is fundamentally statements about who we want to be and how we want to help, right? And I thought, you know, that's something that I still would like to see someday, and maybe I'll work on that and get somebody to do it with me. But it's an important piece, only in recognition of some fundamental principles that we forget during our daily lives, but are reminded through promises. When I performed with those other guys, I had to put back one more stanza so we'd each have 2 lines apiece to do. So, but it was fun. But it was fun. There are some things that you've all heard me tell this story about my shirt, right? Right. But okay. There's lots of nodding and a few head shaking, so you're going to have to hear it once more. So, I wear these shirts a lot, and this is, a nice shirt, and it reminds me of, it has flowers on it, and it reminds me of Mother Earth and my obligation to it. And I tell other people, they should wear something that reminds them of Mother Earth, and then I usually say not flowers because not every man can pull off flowers. But the crux of it is, the crux of it is that I was in a store one day and I don't even want to tell you. I had a really light blue, which I think was silk, ribbon shirt on. It had the word Mississauga on the back. And the man came up to me and he goes, "Nice shirt." I said, "Thank you." He goes, "It takes a special kind of man to wear a shirt like that." So I chuckled and said, "Thanks." But he told me this right before I had to give a speech in the opening for the National Indigenous Games, North American Indigenous Games. Anyway, it was all the youths from across the country come. And it reminded me in that moment that when I was young, I would have been too afraid to dress like this, too afraid of what others would say or what I thought they would say, so I would never wear it. But the truth is, we should never have to change to fit into society. The world around us should adapt to embrace our uniqueness. And that, to me, is a fundamental principle of the way we should live our lives, right? And so I tell that story over and over. And I must admit, it went over really well with all the Indigenous youth who were gathered. But I wouldn't have got that story if I hadn't ran into that man in the store who made that interesting comment. And another thing is, and I'll just do this one really brief because I know I'm running out of time, I did some work with the Rotarians. Any Rotarians in here? Okay, good. No, I'm just kidding. I did some work with Rotarians. So they had their national or international gathering Rotarians in Toronto. 30,000 Rotarians gathered. And Rotarians are great people, and they do good things, and they try to help people. Anyway, they asked me if I'd come and give an opening. I said, 30,000 people? Yeah, I'll be there. And so they let me know. I should tell you that Rotarians are very, how do you say it? Very process-driven, right? And so they contacted me a year in advance, and then they contacted me 6 months, 3 months, 5 months, 4.5 months and 2 weeks. Anyway, so they calling me and contacting me, wanting me to send them pictures, bios, and my speech. Now, this might seem easy to you guys, but but to me, in the way I function, it's like, yeah, I'll get to it. And so 3 weeks left to go, and I must have been driving them nuts. 3 weeks left to go, I finally sent them a picture, or told them just grab a picture off the website, send them my bio, and they were still after my speech. And with a week and a half left to go, I finally wrote something down and sent it to them. And they sent it back and said, Chief, according to our word counter, you're over the allotted time we've allowed. Yeah, so I had 2 poems in this thing, so I go, okay. So I took 1 poem out, and I sent it back to them, and then, I had to go down the day before and practice and rehearse. That woman just gave me the finger. I had to go down and practice and rehearse. And I went down there and did that. And it's the first time I got to use one of those, what do you call those screens where you can see it out in the audience, the word, what do you call them? Prompters? Teleprompter. First time I used one. Those are awesome. Anyway, that's a story. Anyway, so you got to practice. So I said, okay. So I come and I read it, and I go, oh, you took out both poems. And I said, well, I don't think I can do this. And I'm not thinking that these are very process-driven people that I've just said at the last minute. I don't think I can do this for you. I think you're going to have to find somebody else to greet your audience and welcome them. Because you talk about working with Indigenous people and respecting Indigenous people. And I kind of feel like you're treating me the opposite. So no offense to your organization, I said, but you're just going to have to find somebody else. And so they left the room and they came back and they said, you can have as long as you want, Chief. Just, so feel free to put the other poem back in. So what I said to them was, okay, that's great, thank you. I said, but, we get so caught up in the moment that we should always take a second and step back and make sure the moment we're in is in keeping with who we are and who we want to be. I said, because we get caught up in this moment and we're not doing justice and actually might be doing a disservice to the overall operation of who you think you are. And I said, it's not just a lesson for you, it's also a lesson for me because I forget all the time because I'm in the moment all the time. And I have to always step back and go, okay, is this who I am and who I want to be? Is this how I want to be represented in the world? And I think that's an important teaching as well. There's a couple more or at least one more that I was going to talk about, but we are running out of time now, so we'll just... Now she gave me the symbol for eating. Well, thank you for that. So I'm just going to wrap it up and say thank you. As you know, as you can see, a little 45-minute to an hour lecture for me is fun, but I talk too much. So miigwech, and thank you for your time.
A question whether you would share with you the last piece of wisdom that you wanted to share.
Well, actually, there are a few things I wanted to share with you, but I don't have time, but I will share that one piece was I wrote the poem Common Ground. And when I originally wrote the poem, I wrote it from the perspective of the Indigenous voice. But then when I start reading it in front of people, I realized this isn't just about Indigenous, this is about all of us. And so the poem didn't have a title at that point, but after that it became known as Common Ground. And I used it all the time, and I tell people, everybody sees or hears some small part of themselves within this poem. And that teaches us that no matter how far apart we may seem, we're never so far that we can't find common ground. And that's an important step, an important teaching. There's other things too, but we'll have to save them for the next sort of.
Well, Giima Laforme, I think we're so honored to have you here and to continue the great work. I know last time we spoke, you talked about transforming within your community to have peacekeepers, and the way in which you wanted them to replace almost the policing aspect. And I don't know, I think we have a few more minutes. Do we have? We have a few more minutes. So
that might take a long explanation.
No.
But there are things going on that I could use Massey's help with regards to, and maybe I wrote them down somewhere. So maybe peacekeeping is a strategy for jurisdiction over a long, long road, understanding justice systems and what exists today, and how do we bring our own world into that world, or how do we go forward. But eventually it is the hope that we legislate and do it all ourselves without any outside interference. But the thing that I could use, well, first off, if I could say that I need to hire a social and health director, but what I really need is an administrator, somebody who has that capacity to come in and administrate this Indigenous health and social department for me, because we're struggling with change and adaptation, and everybody is really struggling in COVID to find people to fill certain roles. And if this is, if Massey has some supports and organizations outside that could be a benefit, I'd love to have a conversation about that and what we can do to be of assistance. If there's anybody in the organization like that, or outside. And the other thing I wanted to say was, I have a tourism strategy that's massive in my head, and I'm just starting to put it on paper with people. And is there a way that we could work with Massey and actually strategize the whole picture out? I mean, because right now there's points of entry, there's connectivity, there's driving revenue streams, there's driving tourism, there's a new center being built. So there's a lot of complex parts to it. And we're working on it, and I'm working on it slowly, but I really need that structural picture with all the little pieces filled in to understand absolute resources and those types of things and make it actually happen. So if there's a way that I could work with anybody here to talk about sitting down and doing that, that would be of immense benefit. So, the last thing I wanted to say is I always end this way now. Bum a P, which means see you again, but be safe and be heard.